Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us to have a very nice conference. My name is Chantal Dagneau. I'm the president of ECO Association. We are focused on industrial international compensation and offset. And this afternoon we will talk about imposition of penalties in defense offset case in India. So we have two famous people this afternoon, and I would like to thank you again for joining us this afternoon. On my left, we have Ravi Shib. He is the founder of a consulting company involved in the crowdsourcing and business wargaming for corporate and government. He was director with PricewaterhouseCoopers in India, where you assist a large number of European firms. And the objective was to formulate their market entry and growth strategy. And he's also served with the Indian Ministry of Defense, where he was involved with capital procurement for the Indian Defense Forces, and with the added responsibility of being head of the Defense Offset Facilitation Agency Secretariat. You has pioneered the growth and implementation of the defense offset policy in the country, I would say in India, from 2007 to 2009. You have a master's in defense study, and you are a very active speaker as today. So this afternoon, you're gonna speak with us, and you will present a war game that you faced with in February of this year. And the aim of your business warm game was to determine the reason behind to increase trend of failure to fulfill the offset obligation in India, leading to penalties and options available to the process. And so the floor is yours, Ravish. And after that, we will go to deep dive and have some time for the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chantal. Thank you, ECO, for having me here. It indeed is a pleasure. The topic today which I'm going to talk about is a conduct of a war game where the subject was imposition of penalties in defense offset cases in India. It is not something which any country would like, actually, to impose penalties. But since it was increasing, we thought it would be right to have a war game to find out what are the reasons why there are so many penalties in India. And nobody wants these penalties. The Indian government doesn't wants to penalize. It does not get any sadistic pleasure in penalizing. The OEMs don't want it. Their reputation is at stake. The Indian offset partners don't want to lose business to penalties. But still, if nobody wants it, still why are we having it? So we conducted a war game on this. Now what is a war game? It is a business simulation where all the stakeholders make teams and we take them into the future or into the past, as the case was in this one, otherwise normally into the future, painting all the situations which would happen in real life, and the teams interact and one team's decision affects another. And which are these teams? They are the regulators, the suppliers, your competitors, any stakeholder which is involved in your business. So therefore, moving forward, what was the problem why we conducted this war game? Now the problem was that $13.52 billion of offsets are pending and have to be implemented by the year 2027. Out of this, $3 billion has been accepted in audit, and the balance is yet to come. And out of this $3 billion, about a penalty of $100 million has been put on various OEMs or companies or suppliers. So that means that more than 1 out of every 2 contracts are getting penalized. So therefore we conducted a war game. We are, as it is, a crowdsourcing and a war gaming company. And these war games are conducted to either test a strategy, to ascertain a geopolitical fallout, to understand what your competitors are doing, all when entering a new geography, to understand consequences of a regulatory policy. That is what this one was all about. And to predict the fate of a procurement program. The last one which we did before this was on a P-75I submarine program, whether it will succeed or not succeed, because it was a very major program and a very complex program. And again, before that, we did one on the corporatization of the Indian ordnance factories in India, whether that will succeed or fail in the future. The aim of this war game, which I will cover at the details, was to find out what are the reasons behind the failure to fulfill offset obligations. Then what options are available now to hasten the process? And can there be a win-win situation between the OEMs and the government of India? All the participants who took part, 25 of them, and we are very fortunate that Deepak also took part in the war game, and Deepak Sangha is ex-director offsets with MBDA UK, was ex-director offsets, and he was nominated as one of the best speakers over there. All previous cases of penalization were assessed. I'll be giving out some sample case studies right now. I'm sure certain OEMs may be interested in that, but I can only, since I have a limited time of 20 odd minutes, I'll be able to just confirm, talk about it very briefly. The objective is given on the slide, and basically India attempts to leverage its high defense spend. Even though we have reduced our imports by about 20%, we still remain the world's largest importer. This slide shows the evolution of offsets. Most of you, this is just basic enough to understand right now that it is based on defense procurement procedures, which has been evolving over the years. There have been a whole lot of changes which have been taking place, which this slide shows. Services was there, then it went out, then it came back with only MRO. Same way, there were no multipliers earlier, then multipliers came, kept changing. Offset banking was not there, then came in, then went out again. And even these changes don't portend a good thing, because by the time you settle down with one procurement procedure, there are some changes which are brought in. Now, as far as the future is concerned, it was brought out in the war game that we may not be signing too many offsets in the future. But the present ones are going to see us till 2033. That is when possibly the last one closes down. So in the next decade or so, we are going to have offsets from the present cases which are going to continue. And why the future cases are not going to be there is for the simple reason that India's threshold level for offsets is $305 million US. And now India has removed G2G cases, that is government to government contracts, from the offset criteria. So if I combine the two, $305 million, these are normally all G2G contracts. And if there are no offsets in G2G contracts, then there will be hardly any offsets which are going to be signed in future. So notwithstanding that, what about the present penalties? So out of the 57 contracts signed, there are more than 30 penalties. Now why has it happened? Again, this will take hours to tell you, but just briefly, there was a case of a buyer nominated equipment, BNE it is called, where the buyer tells you what to buy. And in this case, the buyer nominated equipment was delayed for a certain reason. And the blame went to the OEM and the OEM was fined. This was one case. In another case, an export license was delayed, which the OEM's government has to give. So whom do you blame for that? MOD could have been more flexible, maybe given more time, because the foreign government's decision was coming a bit late. But one offset has happened because of that. One penalty case has happened because of that. Now these are all penalization cases. Those who are aware of the offsets in India would realize that there was a term called direct foreign investment. And a lot of simulators, etc. came through that route. But this perception of this phrase, direct foreign investment, changed after a few years, somewhere a decade back. And once it changed, the new people who were there in the offset regime of India didn't allow these simulators. But by that time, five contracts had been signed with the simulators. So they had to do the offsets over and over again, and this contributed, as per the war game findings, to a penalization case. In another case, the main contract got extended, and the OEM thought that the offset contract will automatically get extended. And it was too late when he realized that this was not allowed. The MOD expected him to say that offset contract is a different contract and please extend this also because the main contract has got extended. But since he didn't, it was another penalization case. Another incident, that OEM X had a whole lot of a global network of diversified businesses. So he had sister company A, B, C, D, E as part of a group company. All listed centrally, finances held centrally under a group head. So when, let us say, one entity got the contract, but the offset was done by another entity, that was not allowed. And that is why this penalization case took place. The last one on the slide is that a rephasing request. When offsets are carried out over 6-7 years, a lot of times when there will be a delay, there will be a change in your partner required, there will be a change in the duration required, and if a decision does not come from the MOD within a specified time frame, when you ask for it, if it takes 2 years or 4 years, then, and there is a penalization case after that, then where does it get attributed to? So here it was attributed to the OEM, and this is another example of a penalization case. Similarly, the war game found out that if the offset targets are too ambitious for a certain reason and not well planned for, we found in those cases also have led to penalization because the OEM could not complete it. Another example is that a tier 1 which was doing offsets did not meet the annual target as the products were imported by a third party. That is, the tier 1 himself didn't buy it, a third party bought certain products, and that was not allowed. So similarly, these are the kind of cases, and I'm sure if you are offset experts, you can make out that what is the kind of situation where penalizations have been occurring more. So just to sum it up, I will say that whenever the war game experts felt that this non-performance of a penalty situation is attributable to the OEM, the main reason was either lack of understanding of offset regulations or too ambitious an offset program. In other cases, the analysts felt that this penalization cases have occurred, the bulk of them, when external factors have played a role in discharge of offsets. A foreign government, like the example which we saw, or when the services have to sign a contract before offsets can start, or maybe because of COVID. So whenever external factors have played a role, those are the times when offset obligations have led to penalizations. And the last reason is for the cause of non-performance is due to the delay or due to the change in perception or due to the ambiguity in policy which existed at one time. So with this, I just sum up the basic reasons when we considered each and every penalty case. This is what we saw. Some other reasons. One is lack of flexibility and delay in approvals in mid-course corrections. So like I said earlier, mid-course corrections will be required in any offset program. To be successful, the offset program has to have flexibility to increase the time to change your offset partner, and this flexibility and this decision has to lie with the OEM. In case this decision lies with the MOD and they take a long time in giving a decision, then it will eventually lead to penalization. Differing perceptions of offset management staff, I've already covered that point. And value addition in India is again a point where people have got surprised when they expected that 100% will get counted, but when the value addition was 30%, and at the last minute they came to know that the value addition is only 30%. And when they gave only 30%, then they were already behind in the offset ladder, and to recover takes time, and each year's delay causes penalty. So therefore, the lessons learned in this war game were that we need to build up communication, transparency and trust between the OEM and the Ministry of Defense. By the OEM, I mean the main supplier and the Ministry of Defense. It has to be, offsets has to be a game. It has to be understood that it is a business, and it has to be understood that there has to be trust and there has to be flexibility. They need to be closely followed to avoid any surprise rejections, because then OEMs will run around in the last minute. They try their best to avoid penalties, at least in the first time. But once it has happened, somehow it has been seen during the war game that they lose interest. And there are a lot of cases like this, where there's nothing happening on ground, and there's neither a penalty coming, nor is the offset obligation getting completed. And overemphasis on procedures and risk aversion, which is famous with the bureaucracy. So in case you are too risk averse, then your decision making will get delayed. And if your decision making gets delayed, then indirectly you are contributing to a penalization case. A perception that each incoming offset obligation is $1 to $1 value Now, to find a solution to this whole issue of penalization, firstly, this perception has to go. Need to document negotiations, like whenever you negotiate verbally, orally, in a meeting, it should be documented and sent back to both the sides. I mean, either side should do it. Because what is said, at times, somebody else may refute it a year later. And you have to play safe. When fulfillment of obligations are based on third parties, a foreign country, a foreign government, or the services, then you might as well play safe in the contract itself. So therefore, what is the present situation, which was analyzed in the war game? Now the present situation is that basically right now the penalizations are occurring in DPP of 2008 with the sprinkling of 2013. If we continue this way, the OEMs also are keeping quiet for reasons known to them. The Indian government also is going on penalizing. If we continue this way, then the penalizations are going to increase exponentially. And in a conflicted approach like this, in offsets, there will be no winners. Everybody loses. Therefore, there are stalemate situations which are existing where nothing is happening on ground. And therefore, we all need to find a solution to this imbroglio. And more than 50 offset contracts right since 2006 are still open. They haven't been closed. So therefore, the war game recommended that priority should be given to legacy stalemate cases first. Those are the ones of 2008, deal signed in 2012, 2013. First, they should be given priority. Where the offset time is over, where the delivery has been done. So those are the cases which need to be given priority first. And in those cases, we must give a second chance to the OEMs to fulfill their offset obligations. And this second chance should be under a new regulation, and there will be more time and to be carried out under any of the DPPs published till date. To facilitate the second chance, it was also recommended in the war game that MOD may create a dispute resolution body which is led by a senior bureaucrat or industry professional. This body will call for fresh proposals, examine each case, give fresh time limits, and allow the OEMs to carry out their offsets. And we realize that this is the only win-win situation as far as the penalizations are concerned. Contracts which are not in a stalemate situation where there is no issue and no problem of offsets, they can be dealt by DOMW as heretofore. So this was a recommendation which has gone to the media, it has gone to the ministry, and it has gone to various industry bodies. And some other recommendations were that allow third parties to export orders, to execute export orders. Now, it doesn't matter that as long as the export is taking place from India, personally, I don't feel it matters to India that who exports it or who imports it rather. So therefore, third parties should be allowed. The analysts also recommended that on submission of a rephasing request, in case no approval or no decision is received within 3 months, then additional time taken must be added to the time available to the vendor for offset discharge. So that means this is just to hurry up the Ministry of Defense to give decisions in time. Allow flexibility when OEMs are seeking minor deviations from stated procedures. Establish a threshold for value addition. Now, value addition was a very important point. So there should be a threshold for it. For example, if 70% of value addition has been done in India, it should be counted as 100% of offset value. Okay, and lastly, it was to reduce the long-winded procedures and inordinate focus on paperwork. There was too much of paperwork involved, and it is said that we gave examples of what are the paperwork which can be reduced and can be done away with. But if you have noticed, in none of the examples, the Indian offset partner is to be blamed somehow. So that means Indian offset partners have been doing an excellent job. And over here also we have Axon Cables, which has been doing an excellent job. As far as the OEMs are concerned, everything in time, and the OEMs have proved and that they are happy with either the French companies which are in India or Indian companies who have been their offset partners. So now we will come to a panel discussion, and I'm sure Chantal has a lot of questions to ask, and also the crowd. And we'll be happy to do that in the next, I think, 20 minutes more.
Thank you very much, Ravish. A very interesting business case. So I will have the first question for you, and after the floor we ask the question. So my first question will be, what is the consequences of the war game on the regulatory policy in offset in India?
Yes, so Chantal, I would say that it is a bit early. The war game was done in February, and the media has published the findings everywhere. The findings are with the OEMs also. In case some OEMs have already contacted us to get more details regarding this, and we'll be happy to give to the other OEMs, whoever would like to get more details on the subject. These details, it takes time, 3 to 4 hours to explain that each and every modality. But now that they have got it, I would suggest that they must use their industry bodies. You know, there are industry bodies in India like CII, FICCI, and then there are these industry bodies of various countries like AmCham and USIBC, and I'm sure European countries also have their industry body to further the cause. I'm sure as far as MOD has gone through our recommendations, and I'm sure confident that they'll be taking a decision which is favorable. I'm hopeful of that, but till now I would say that nothing has happened.
Thank you very much. Is there any question for Ravish before we moving to Deepak?
Shall I add something?
No, go on that way. Closer.
I think just adding on to what Rajiv has said, I think the first thing...
No, we can't hear you. Closer.
Yeah. I think the first thing to do is to also Indian MOD and the various Indian authorities to consult their own industry, because their own industry is suffering because of these penalty scenarios, because they are not getting any further work, and some decisions by the OEMs are being delayed because they don't know how the future will hold out for them. So their approach, I think, there should be, is to really look at all these Indian offset partners who have resoundingly said that it has helped them very much. That whatever the drawbacks, whatever the issues have been with offsets in terms of meeting with OEMs, they have certainly benefited. And they would like to benefit even more if this resolution is done at early stage.
Thank you very much. Is there any question for Ravish? Not yet. So I propose that we... Oh, one question, sorry.
Sorry, could you just explain why? I understood that offsets in India are going to reduce the volume of offsets because of a threshold effect, but I did not understand precisely the threshold effect. You said there was a two-way mechanism with two different effects. Could you just repeat? Thank you.
You understand what a threshold is, offset threshold? Is that understood? What an offset threshold value is? Yeah, 305 million. So that means contracts only after beyond 305 million will have offsets.
Mm-hmm.
Contracts below that do not have offsets, right?
Okay.
Okay. Now, 305 million is a very large figure. It's a huge figure. And there are very few contracts signed above 305 million, normally. And if such contracts are signed, they are normally a contract for a platform. You know, like an aeroplane, like a submarine, like a ship. You know, those are the contracts which are beyond 305 million. And normally they are government to government contracts. You know, it might be a FMS in US case, it might be in any other case, even the Rafale deal is a G2G contract, a government to government contract. So such contracts are government to government contracts. So now from 2020, a new regulation was introduced which said that in government to government contracts, there will be no offsets. So if you put these 2 points together, it just, nobody has said it publicly, but if you just put them together, you will find that there will be no offsets.
And what is the source of this decision of no more G2G offset obligations?
It's written in the DAP 2020. The DAP, the Defense Acquisition Procedure, of which came out in 2020, is written over there.
Shall I add something to that as well? It's also Indian policy is changing. It's more about an initiative to, in the future, to start building systems in the country. So they know that the offsets are a big issue for OEMs, and it's very difficult for them to establish very quickly in the areas of technologies which they are looking for. So they are going for co-development and for co-production, and really so they're going for co-production, co-development, and at the same time self-sustainability. So they are I think in terms of intent that's a very good way forward, but the mechanisms have still to be understood how that all will work. So that means that if all this comes into fruition, offsets will be absolutely disappearing in the future, sometimes in the future.
I'll just add on to that. So offsets are disappearing, but localization is increasing in every procurement contract. There is a localization percentage.
How do you enforce this localization percentage? By contractual obligations?
Yes, it is written in the tender that 50% has to be local. Now, how do you check it? Maybe is your question?
No.
Okay, fine.
No, to me, localization was part of the offset agreement. So in fact, it's only in a contract. It will be written in the contract.
Yes. So the offset policy, offset contracts were not getting signed, but localization is increasing. So actually, in a way, it's amounting to the same thing.
Yeah, and
then I've got a question that you already partly answered, because imagine we already set up a factory for offset in India, and so we know now it's going to end in, let's say, So, what is going to happen to this factory? And what does the government of India thinks about this? Because if this factory has been set up to fulfill offset obligation and there is no more offset, so what is the future of this factory? And you said India is concerned about get employment and so on and transfer of technology, but at the end, if this factory is closed because there is no more work, it's not going to be a big deal, also interesting deal for India. Is there any concern about the future of what has been set up in the past to comply with offset?
Which is the factory you're talking about?
Imagine I've already set up the factory. Okay. So you are telling me, as the Indian government, you have no more, because of this, you have no more offset. So what should I do? Should I close the factory? Or should I use my factory to localize my product? Yes, but it's a different type of business.
I think I sometimes feel that offset obligations should not be the only driver of really establishing a business in the country. India is still a huge market. It will be for the near future, especially in defense systems and other manufacturing activities. So every supplier or every company, European or foreign OEM, will have to understand that it doesn't reduce their business opportunities. If you have got a factory which you have already established, actually I will think it the other way, that it is a positive step that you can work with the OEMs and say, well, look here, we have already got a facility which is set up and we can do the localization through that factory, which can then meet all your requirements because we are already taking the technologies which are available in Europe and which we have developed, and we are producing in India. So it already gives you a leverage in terms of winning business. So one thing is absolutely sure, that India has still got a huge defense procurement requirement. India is still a huge market. So just because offsets are not going to be there, localization is growing, so you will have lots of other opportunities to really make avail of. So I would say just forget about offsets and start looking at how do you really leverage your business in India in order to really have greater localization, working with Indian partners and making sure that you are in the bidding and in the run for the Indian defense business and aerospace business. So I think you still have a great future, and actually you have got a head start because you are not going to establish new facilities. And look at the competitivity and the cost element of it as well. It may be that on a global sourcing way, you might still get some benefits out of it. So I won't really sort of say that offsets have gone, that means the opportunities have gone. I think you still have got a bright future if you can get into the localization side of things.
Yes, we agree, but in some way this is the Indian government which transfers the responsibility to the company because of an Indian government decision, which could make sense, but then this is the responsibility, as you say, of the private sector to make this happen and to allow the business to continue. But I agree there is a bright future in India in defense.
Yeah, and there are plenty of examples where successful partnerships have been established, and both parties, the European companies and the Indian companies, have benefited from it. And I think really removing the shackles of regulatory regimes and penalization due to offsets, overcomplicating the procedures, if that is removed, I think the path will be much clearer and easier and simpler in order to do business in a real sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll just add on. So basically now the tenders are going to DPSUs, the public sector units. So why have offsets gone? Because now the tender which was going outside, overseas, it is going to the defense public sector unit. Now this defense public sector unit, for example, helicopter, has gone to him, but he requires assemblies and sub-assemblies, which are coming from your suppliers, like again Thales, the same suppliers of French smaller companies. And for them to now have an overall localization of 50 or 60% is a big challenge. And every supplier has been told that please localize, please localize. Now again, I think the business will increase instead of decreasing if there are no offsets. Only thing is it's not being called offsets, it is now localization which has increased. So I think it will increase and not decrease as far as the sales are concerned.
I think what the push has to be on the Indian government that in the future, let's not make a regulatory regime like offsets when we are doing localization. Let's make the system more flexible. Let's make it more conducive to business as a growth. That's the only way that the Indian industry will develop to the levels where it wants it to be so that it can do its own production of systems. There will always be, even here in Europe or elsewhere, people are buying from the supply chain which is quite diverse, which is quite global. So once they really get into the mainstream of those supply chains, then they have got better opportunities as well, and their industry is growing and it's getting stronger. So I think the only thing we will have to watch out that they don't make this localization process so complicated like offsets.
So thank you. Deepak, I just realized that I didn't introduce yourself because you start to answer for the question. So you have more than 45 years experience working in aerospace and defense industry. During this period, you overseen a lot of aspects, technical projects, undertaken several assignments involving procurement, commercial activities, and winning export orders too. So you covered all the aspects of international offset operation, ranging from preparation of offset proposal, negotiating industrial cooperation agreements, establishing supply chain as a part of the offset execution, establishing partnership with a range of local industries and execution of offset programs to deliver offset. So I will say that you are the man of offset in India, but your company is based in the UK. So I have a question for you and for Ravish too. You say that penalty will increase in the next 5 years. Why?
Yes, very good question. Thank you, Shan. So $13 billion of offsets have been done, right? I mean, they are to be done. They have to be finished by 2027. $13 billion worth. And till now we have audited only $3 billion worth of offsets. And we have got $100 million of penalties in 35 contracts out of 57 already. So therefore, what happens when the balance $10 billion, which is 3 times the amount, gets audited? How many penalties will come at that time? So that is the reason we feel that in the next 5 years are going to be busy years, and this localization will also be there, and offset demand will also be there as far as those companies are concerned. So you will have busy, as far as suppliers are concerned, there will be busy times ahead. So we hope that and this penalization cases will increase if status quo continues, if nobody changes their ways. But if somebody pays heed to the war game findings, then maybe we'll have better times ahead, and which are not so, with less penalization cases.
So when is your point of view on that?
Yes, I think penalization is one of those real dark horses and a beast which needs to be addressed. I would say taking the bull by the horns by especially the Indian government, because it has been just having a stalemate doesn't help both parties, because Indian government is losing its faith and its confidence within the industry, right? Because it's not really having partnerships with the OEMs, it's having a contractual sort of process which doesn't help both parties, because the OEMs will absolutely make sure that they are not going to take any risk if this stalemate is going on, and they will keep on delaying decisions for future investments, because they still see India as an important market. They want to do business in it. They have got the hunger for it. So why don't they want to go in and do it? It's basically because the issue they have got is that if we haven't resolved our previous issues with the Indian government, what are we going to end up ourselves if we sign new contracts, and where will it take us? So that's losing business. The second thing is that Indian industry is losing business, because basically decisions are being delayed, and they have got agreements in place, but until the old penalties are taken care of, the OEMs are dragging their feet. They say we don't want to end up in a further difficulties on new contracts with the Indian offset partners, because we don't know whether that project or that program or that proposal will be agreed by the Indian authorities, because we are already facing penalties, and they will bring up this subject that you are already having penalties, so why should I really listen to you and accept new flexibility in your programs to deliver. So this stalemate has to be really a win-win. Removing the stalemate really will remove a lot of obstacles, and it will make the industry going into a more dynamic phase. At the moment, I think it has not really reached its potential. It's only sort of 10 to 20% of its potential. So by removing this stalemate, it can easily give the confidence to all parties that we can do business in India, and we can make revenues in India, and the profitability is good, and the industry is winning both in India and abroad.
So we still have 5 minutes before to conclude. Any question? Other question? I have one question for you. Concerning specific war game, I would say that it's quite innovative in the defense industry. Do you think that this kind of business game, the war game, is a real feature concerning the Indian offset policy for the next 5 coming years?
Yes, we can have a phase 2 of this war game in case India's offset policy needs a change. Maybe the next time we do a war game, it will be to suggest or find out what are the changes in India's offset policy which can be a win-win situation for OEMs and the Indian government. So we can have a phase 2 of this war game to discuss the future Indian policy. But at present, I feel maybe next year, why not? We can have a second phase of the war game. But this one's aim was only to find out why penalizations happen. And that's what we did. Maybe next one we can do and have again the best of the brains globally taking part to suggest changes in policy in case Indian government still thinks that offset should be revived. Right? Revived. In the sense, right now we are seeing that the policy, there may be no new contracts. And from 2020 to today, we have got no new contracts. So if that continues, we may not require such a war game. But if Indian government wants to revive the offset policy again, by any chance, then definitely we'll be happy to have a war game like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good way forward. If it can be utilized, then it's a very effective tool to really have quick findings and using the best available resources, crowdsourcing from the experts all over the place. So I think it's a good way of doing things. And I think the one point which Rajiv has mentioned, that reviving a policy. Now I remember that the 2008 policy was about that thick. Now the 2020 DAP procedure, I can't really sort of hold it in my hand, it's so thick. So in effect, the whole process has got complicated. I think now we need to really start pushing for reversing that process, make it more simpler, make it more flexible, make it more executionable, make it more profitable for both sides. and more effective and efficient so that things can move quicker and all the parties can make good business.
Can you confirm that the war game that you create is applicable also in Europe or other part of the world, or only shaped for India context?
War games are applicable in any corporate scenario. A company may say that I'm just giving you some live situations. A company may say, I want to increase my price by 10%. How will my competitors react? So we will play your competitors, we will play your regulators, we will play your suppliers, and we will carry out a war game for you on this aspect. Now this company can be in Europe, it can be in US, it can be in India, it can be anywhere. The concept is same.
The war game, I think the one thing which is very, very interesting about it, it's a very immersive process. It's not sort of, not a stepwise process. You are brainstorming, you are concluding, you are agreeing, so you're reaching a consensus very quickly between all the parties that seems to be a good output. So that's a very good scenario, and it can be used for anything really. If you want to establish business in India and you want to move into the market or in any other market anywhere in the world, and you want a quick decisions and you want a quick way forward, then I think it is a very, very effective and efficient tool to address the issue which you have got in hand. So it could be used for any scenario really.
So thank you very much. I know that we have to stop and to conclude. So thank you again, Ravish and Deepak. And I would say that for ECO, it could be a very good opportunity for our training session to use the war game to experience some specific issue on that. And it will be a pleasure to collaborate with you on that aspect. So thank you all, and have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.